Ciao, Bellas. Welcome to Pleasure Principles, Sacred G-Spot Secrets to Embodying Your Magic, Money, Sex, and Business. My name is Sophia Leva Marie with Nurturing Divine Beauty, and I'm so delighted to have a personal mentor of mine with me today, Kara Gilligan. She's a spiritual life and business coach, a tantric wisdom teacher, Akashics channel and reader, and the creator of one of the special teachings in my heart, the Magdalene Wounds, that really changed my life a few years ago. So I'm so thrilled that you're with me today.
I'm so excited to be here, Sophia. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I love that you're actually coming to me from a boat and the ocean, like we're talking about flow and how to actually be in the flow of life and in that fluidity. So it's perfect that you're coming from the ocean, which is one of my favorite things in the world. Perfect.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows, I'm going to try to get a little bit of a view here. We are sailing. This is the harbor in Charleston, South Carolina. You can see, look at those birds out there. I hope we'll get some dolphins.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Talk about pleasure principle. Like, the dolphins are the actual embodiment of joy and pleasure and the whole pleasure principle. And it's so funny because when I booked this interview with you, Sophia, I wasn't supposed to be in Charleston. I wasn't supposed to be on the water today. And I went on a retreat and I got caught up in the Shakti God wave of all these circumstances, which I won't go into, which landed me here, which landed me on this boat with my friend Bamf over there. Say hi.
Hey there.
Hey, Bamf. And his boat is called Om. What is the boat called? Om Sailing and Chart. He's like this yogi that lives on a boat in Charleston and does. So it's like a sacred boat with prayer flags. And I'm like, this is so where we need to be doing the Pleasure Principles Summit. Like, when he told me we could do it from the boat, I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go sailing with you today. Let's make it happen.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, go with the flow and you will find more experiences of joy than you can probably imagine if you're just stuck in your rut. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And speaking of experiences, it's actually something you introduced me to a few years ago during our Magdalene journey. And it was the thought about becoming a sacred temple prostitute. And I got to connect to my past lives of that, and I bring it into my coaching practice. But I'd love to ask you, first of all, for those of listening who are like, oh wait, prostitute, who have a reaction or judgment around that, what is actually a sacred temple prostitute, and how does that relate to today and present reality?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions to get. It's one of my favorite things to teach on. Let me start by, let's just address the elephant in the room. I mean, what is a prostitute to us today? A prostitute is a woman that basically sells her body, and her sexuality is given in exchange for money. It is considered, I think, for the most part, in most people, it is considered what we would call a shadow archetype, or an aspect of ourselves that we don't really have respect for, that's more operating in, like, the underworld, or the realm of, like, the taboo, or the realm of the forbidden, or the realm of the bad or the wrong, right? So and the other thing that I'll say is, I think this archetype in particular, it governs a lot of how women, and how I think a lot of just the energy of the divine feminine in general has been sort of like falsely conditioned in a patriarchal paradigm. So it relates to both, humanity's shame and sense of like desperation and powerlessness in relationship to capitalism and money, and having to do something like almost like sell your soul or sell something sacred or give up something sacred in order to survive financially. So it relates to sort of that component of our psyche when we're living in like a capitalist system where a lot of us have very deep-seated programming that we should sacrifice our purpose, or we should sacrifice our joy, or we should sacrifice who we really are in order to make a buck, right? So that's one shadow component. And then I think the other shadow component that the prostitute archetype brings up for us is, the relationship to sexuality, and the kind of, I call it like the virgin whore split. That's in how most women's sexuality is conditioned, that, if you were a woman that really greatly enjoyed sex or had sex with like lots of people, lots of men, you're a whore. And of course that also relates to how most of us, male and female, but especially females, but both, are conditioned in, a Judeo-Christian sort of Western paradigm to feel a sense of shame around the body and sexuality, and especially like just the expression of pleasure in general. I think a lot of us have some programming there. So that's what we're dealing with ostensibly, like whenever we invoke just the prostitute, right? Yeah. And the sacred prostitute, however, is pretty much, I think for me, this is just the foundation of my kind of message to the world, and just the root of all my work that I've created and offer, which it's different. And so not different, it's actually almost the exact opposite of what we think of as the prostitute archetype, which is kind of like a very nefarious use of our a manipulative powerlessness, like shadow use of our sex and our survival programming that we have as human beings. And when you look at this word prostitute, it actually comes from the Greek word prostituere, which means literally to stand before the altar or to stand before the statue. So this word prostitute, like what do people when they're praying, they're actually laid out, you're prostrating before God. You're in a place of surrender. You're in a place of devotion. You're in a place of almost like, and there's an altar there. So you're giving you're giving an offering to God, to the goddess, to the divine, and you are surrendering. And so the sacred prostitute, actually that word prostitute in and of itself, that word used to be the word for a priestess. It used to be in ancient Greek society, that was the word for a priestess. There was literally no difference. The priestesses were called the prostitutes, okay? So this word, the history of it, is actually a very sacred word, and it is a word for a lost class in Western society, a class of women, holy women, that were devoted, that would be devoted usually to a goddess. They would be devoted in service to the goddess. They would be, married to the divine, and they would be working in the temples. Now, not all sacred prostitutes, so there's some, sacred prostitute healing work where maybe it involved sacred sexuality as part of it. But I think the main thing that I want to get through to everybody is that the word in and of itself didn't even necessarily mean sacred sexuality. It literally meant a holy woman that is devoted to God and goddess. That's literally what the word meant. And so when I invoke the sacred prostitute, when I invoke this archetype again, I'm invoking this new consciousness that I think we all really, really desperately need at this time, which is that attitude of that prostration, that attitude of that surrender, that attitude of that devotion and that offering of our relationship to money and our relationship to sex and our relationship to the material world and the body and everything that is of our mother, the divine mother, okay, mother nature, which to me, all of these things, physical body, the earth itself, the elements, the oceans, the way we relate to all of these things is no longer sacred. Why? Well, maybe because our prostitutes, maybe because we got rid of them from our culture, but also just because we've forgotten. We've forgotten that the creation is sacred. We've forgotten that the body is sacred. We've forgotten that sexuality is sacred. We've forgotten that the material life, if you want it to be in balance, if you want it to flourish and to be in pleasure and to be something that is benefiting all of us instead of what we have right now, which is a lot of toxicity, you have to what? It is surrendered. It is offered. You make this aspect of who we are as human beings something sacred as well. You offer how you use money. You offer how you spend money. You offer how you use your body, how you relate, how you treat your body. All of it becomes an offering, becomes something that is sacred. And you know, for most of us, when we're dealing with things like money and sex, we have so much programming, so much fear, so much shame, so much survival consciousness, so much self-interest makes us want to just put ourselves, and so much trauma, so much fucking trauma, so much trauma that everybody's like this with this stuff. And I invoke this sacred prostitute to kind of like help people let go, help people reconsecrate their relationship to money and their relationship to sex, their relationship to the body and to their material life, to actually reconsecrate that back to the divine, back to whatever your conception of the divine is. But ultimately, if you trace the archetype back, this was the divine mother. And this is all of the lost religions, the lost sacred laws, the lost sacred principles that actually govern how you keep the body and sexuality and money and running of society in a sacred feminine context. And that's what my mission ultimately is to bring that. We can call it goddess wisdom, but maybe we even need like a different word than God and goddess, because that can sometimes trigger people and get them thinking I think I don't know, maybe we need new words. Maybe it's going to be like sacred matter, like the matter, like what matters on earth right now is we're trying to avert, the UN has released that it's we've got 30 years left before irreversible climate change. We need to learn how to do matter sacredly again. We need to learn how to do environment sacredly, body sacredly. We certainly need to learn how to do economics sacredly, in balance, in harmony, and I think sex and relationships as well. Obviously, look at what's going on right now in America, Me Too, everything. So there's a bell out there. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but yeah. So that is my definition of the sacred prostitute. This is essentially a priestess. It's essentially a holy woman. And really, when I'm using that word, I'm invoking the reclamation of the body and money and sex and the material life, as I'm trying to inspire people to see this as sacred again, and to really devote themselves, to prostrate themselves, to surrender these aspects of their lives back to God, and for them to be organized and aligned and used through their spiritually directed life purpose and through the spirit that is in them. And when we do that, the material world comes back into balance with the spirit. And I think we overall get increased happiness and pleasure and all the other good stuff that comes when we're in harmony with the divine. So that's my definition of the sacred prostitute.
I love that, because it's certainly something that I even use. You know, I mean, I know I had past lives as a sacred sexual prostitute, that I can, you know, a surround sound picture of actually having that experience. And then to today's, which looks different. But when I meet them in the etheric temple, it's all about, as you say, returning them to their divine. It's returning them to their light. And it's all the pieces that need to come back into them, into home. And that's what it is. That is the work. And I love that we're taking it from feeling like you have to degrade yourself to experience more money or more pleasure or the sex that you really want, in looking at it as divine. So that's so beautiful that, you know, that's the work that's coming forward.
The exact opposite than degrading.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like, it's like invoking like the most holy power of faith and courage and conviction and devotion to the divine to actually leave whatever job you're working at that's not aligned with your purpose, where you're not, where you're, you know, I used to work at Amazon. The thing is like, no recycling. Like I said, I worked at a tree cemetery. I'm just like, you want to know where the Amazon rainforest is going, people? It's like spelled out. Like, here's where it's going. We're all just internet Walmarting and all the packaging. And so, you know, I was just like, I can't be a part of this paradigm. And then when I left, when I tried to step off that paradigm, then it becomes, well, how are you going to survive? How are you going to make money? I was like, well, I'm going to do what my soul is actually here to do. Right. And at first, like, it just felt like I was hitting this wall, trying to bring my soul purpose in relationship to this money system that just seemed like it was all, you know, programmed with all this like I need to trade my integrity to make money, or I need to be desperate, or I need to be afraid of where the next bill is going to come, or I need to limit my Shakti or my energy so that I can like survive. And I was just coming up against all that programming, and I'm like, fuck, like, how do I get through this? Like, I'm supposed to be this like holy divine Sophia woman here on the planet, like bringing women into the red room with Jesus, and like, oh my, how am I gonna do this, like, with all this? And that's, I mean, really the archetype, this didn't come from Kara, this didn't come from my mind. It was given, it was like a dispensation. It was like, here, like remember. And it came from a living experience of me just getting to the point where it was like, what I was here to do, my relationship to the divine, my truth and my integrity and my alignment to that was like more important than my actual need to survive. It's like I was willing to die for it. I was willing to risk financial destitution for it. I was willing to maybe like, yeah, there's a few years where I was like, I couldn't even afford to buy myself groceries for a few years in the transition. I was literally the starving artist archetype, but I was willing to do that. And in that process, like what happened is I said, God, like and these principles that this world has taught me. You feed me. You take care of me. You show me how to create and to, I know I'm here for a purpose. I have this body. So it's like you, and in that process, I transitioned, I prostrated my relationship to money, and it was put back into alignment with the divine. And so it's totally not about degrading yourself. It's actually about the exact opposite. Now I'm sort of in the process of doing that with my relationship to sex. And it's very hard because we have a lot of self-interest and programming that I've received around who I'm supposed to be with, or if my sexual attraction is this way, but my ego doesn't like how that's showing up in my life, or I think it needs to look like this, or I need somebody to be like this in order for me to be happy. And now I'm in this process of like getting back on my knees. Like, this sex belongs to you. My body belongs to you, divine, goddess, God, whatever you want to call it. Like, my pleasure belongs to you. Like, that was a big thing for me. I was very traumatized, very blocked in terms of like orgasm and stuff. And a lot of tantra, a lot of sacred sexuality practice is like kind of giving up thinking what you should be getting in the bedroom, thinking what needs to happen in your relationship, and actually just becoming present, like surrendering to the present moment. And it's a real spiritual practice. And so I'm in the process now in my personal life of like surrendering all that back to God, and like my attachments to it, my what I think needs to happen, or what I want to happen, and then just allowing the mystery, allowing the divine to organize that relationship too, you know, or those relationships, however it's going to manifest. So that just happened on retreat this weekend. I was like, whether I am celibate, whether I am married, or whether I am a walking whore of existence, I'm like, not my business anymore. All of this belongs to you. All of this is yours now. I'm surrendering it. I'm offering it over. And, you know, the divine can always organize whatever it is, whether it's your relationship to food, or your relationship to sex, or your relationship to money, or your relationship to your parents, whatever it's going to be. The divine's going to do a better job than we're going to do. You know, the divine knows what we really need. So it's not necessarily like owning the sacred prostitute is not necessarily about becoming a sex worker or making millions of dollars. What it really is it's about giving. It's about taking your relationship to money and sex and giving that back to the divine, and committing yourself, devoting yourself, prostrating yourself before the altar of your relationship to divinity, whatever your faith is. That is what's going to now govern that relationship or that energy in your life. And realizing, I guess, in that is realizing that there is a sacred way to do wealth and business and finance, whatever that is, and that there is a sacred way to doing love and relationships and sexuality. And I think, you know, we're all in an experimental process of figuring out what that is. And I think that's an ongoing journey and an ongoing evolution for all of us, both individually and collectively.
Yes. And one of the things you're so masterful at is, as you're prostrating yourself to the divine, you bring in the shadow element. And so many people, I feel, they either get lost in it, or they're afraid to actually go there because they don't view it as sacred. So what would you say is the difference and the oneness in the shadow and the sacred?
That's a very good question. Whoa. Okay. So, you know, we all have shadow. I have a shadow. You have a shadow. Basically, to me, what the shadow is unconscious energy. It's something we have not yet been able to it's like a closet that the light hasn't been turned on yet in that little area. So we all have these little pockets of our psyche, of ourselves, where, you know, we may be conditioned, we may have an unconscious energy that is kind of possessing us in that little area. And yeah, when you work with the sacred prostitute, or you're working with your relationship to money or sexuality, any of these things, because they're like lower chakra things, the demons and the asuras and all the dark forces, what those really are unconscious forces that are sort of, you know, possessing human beings. Mm-hmm. And when you're working with this, you're going to be coming up against that in yourself and in others a lot.
Yeah.
Right? But let's, you know, demon is kind of like, oh, now we're all really scared, but let's just talk about like what a demon might really be. A demon might actually be like I'm so afraid of like survival. Like I need to survive like so badly that I would rather like stay at this job that isn't aligned with me, and it's draining my energy each day. And because I get drained, then I start eating the McDonald's, or I start going home and drinking at night. And that might add some more quote unquote unconscious levels and quote unquote demons. It's just unconscious energy, right? So I think when you're working with the sacred prostitute, or you're working on healing your relationship to money or to sex or to anything in the material world, in the material nature, you've got to become courageous about sort of facing the shadow. I think a big part of my work has been removing what I call the Magdalene wounds, which is the shame that we have around our shadows, the shaming, the demonizing, where we actually like, we really just create a little demon and we're like actually terrified of it. We don't want to go there. So the demonizing, and then the disassociation, the casting out of our shadow nature, where we just say, okay, now I'm just going to pretend like that's not going on for me, but it really is. So these, I call them the Magdalene wounds. And really what these Magdalene wounds do is they disassociate us from the experience of the divine feminine. So the underworld in the ancient world, the underworld was not hell. It was actually the realm of the goddess. It was literally like the underworld, like what is beneath your feet, the hummus, the ground beneath your feet. You throw things out and it recycles and it makes new life. And we need to kind of understand our shadow as like something that actually needs some recycling. It needs some consciousness. It needs some attention. We need to kind of strip away the shame of it and the demonizing of it. Obviously, all of us have a huge ass fucking shadow right now. We wouldn't be on the brink of a global apocalypse if we weren't very unconscious on some level of our being. And so I think there needs to be like a new way of dealing. Like I really don't like a lot of the really strong demonization of criminals or people that commit crimes, or like the strong shaming that goes on around. What we really need to do is get real with ourselves and realize like we are both light and we have this shadow, and then we need to learn how to deal with the shadow. Okay, we need to learn how to look at what are these unconscious feelings, belief systems, and traumas that are driving behaviors that we actually don't want to be. We need to realize that we are God, and essentially what that means is that we are the creators of our life experience, and we have the power. Once we become conscious of something, we have the power to change it. We have the power to make a new decision and to basically take that energy and repurpose it, recycle it, and make it into something beautiful and something good. And so I always say this, you can't work the path of the sacred prostitute, the sacred sexual priestess, the sacred well priestess, whatever you want to call, whatever realm of matter that you're working in. You can't be a sacred prostitute without also being a shadow priestess. And not many people get this. Like, I'm like, the shadow is the mother. Like, this is the divine feminine. Like, the divine feminine is creation consciousness, and it is a unconscious form of God. It is a form of God. Prakriti, or the creation, is becoming God. It is realizing God, but it is not fully realized yet. And so the unconscious energy is a part of Mother Nature. It's a part of actual nature. When you look at predator-prey dynamics, you look at how nature itself organizes, there's unconscious energy in nature. When you look at ourselves, there's unconscious energy in ourselves. If we want to bring the sacred feminine back, if you want to bring the sacred prostitute back, if you want to sanctify your relationship to money or sex, you've got to learn a new way of dealing with the shadow or dealing with the unconscious that isn't based in these Magdalene wounds, which shame, demonizing, and disassociation keeps matter and keeps the creation, allows it to be run by what we call quote unquote demons. When we shame it, demonize it, cast it out, we've just created the demon that's there. That when you pick up the newspaper and you're like, how the fuck? Why does God let this go on? And I just want to lay that down and be like, who do you think is God? Motherfucker, it's you. Like, it's us. Like, we've got to make the choice, become the stewards of creation that we're meant to be. And we've got to make the choice to deal with the scary stuff about life. And what I find is, like, it's actually not that scary once you just are in that more, like, it's like a very compassionate maternal energy that we need, like just a compassionate acceptance of ourselves, of our weaknesses, of our flaws, of our fears, of our deep-seated needs for acceptance, for love, for belonging, for all these things. And when we can have that compassion for ourselves and start to work with those energies in like a conscious, present, compassionate way, then we can treat others that way. We could treat the planet that way, and that's when we're gonna like start to find, I think, the power to bring about real solutions and change that we need. So that's how I would deal with shadow. Yeah.
Yes. And as you said, the solution starts with us. I mean, I know that in my own personal journey with the Magdalene wounds, you helped me see that the sexual abuse I had at age 8 happened to be with my father. I didn't know that piece until I went on that journey with you. And that allowed that peace and that information and that light to return home. And it didn't happen like right away. Yes, it did happen.
We've got to talk about like dude went home.
Yes. Yes, it happened. So I was able to return that light home, but I didn't have that information. As you said, that was unconscious energy that I had that was allowing me to operate in a certain way that I had no idea. And allowing that to first shine the light so that it could then become light, then I could show up differently.
Well, I would just want to say that most of us who have the priestess codes or the sacred mother codes, the sacred feminine codes in us, or were these sacred prostitutes in our former lives, most of us have been through some pretty deep sexual abuse traumas and other forms of trauma, because it's a reflection, obviously, of actually what happened, which was the destruction of the temples, and this whole paradigm of the witch burnings and demonizing the material life and all of this. And so I just have to say this, like we are like we're like the heroines for the earth, right? You're a heroine. That just that act alone of like you agreeing to come in, agreeing to experience that, you having the whole life experience that you had, which brought you to the point of finally being able to actually see it, because it's horrific. It's horrific to see. And I don't want to, I say like we have to like make the shadow acceptable in order to process it, but like it's really scary. It could be really scary. And you're an absolute hero, an absolute heroine for bringing for going through that. And I think we need a lot of support. We need like it happened in the Magdalene wounds. And I think one of the ways that I think when it comes to these demons and when it comes to these really terrible shadows, like childhood sexual abuse from the parent, and there's so many, just what's going on with the farming industry in America, and the cows in Texas, and the oceans, the pollution. If we really feel these things, they're like, oh my God, how are we letting this happen? And so I think it's important that we have I think we also need like support. We need like groups where we come together and we say, okay, let's do this together. So it's not as scary. So we have a sacred container. And I think like I had sexual abuse trauma too from a primary caregiver. And it's like, when I found other women sharing their stories, it like helped that come out and be processed for me. And it's like that energy of like, I think we can do together what we can't do alone is also a very important part of processing the shadow. Again, because the shadow is the mother, it is the feminine, it's basically carrying the potential for feminine power. Feminine power is relational power. It is the power of the all. And so I also think we really need like each other in order to actually go through the process of confronting the ills and the evils in the world right now. And it's only through that joint effort that there's like a magic of the sacred relationship that blooms from when you process it and you get reconnected to life again and to other human beings. And
Yes,
maybe we should just have like support groups all over the country.
We travel there by boat. Yes. Well, it's even a divine principle that where two or more are gathered, that's where spirit is. So, we can come home and come back to light together. And this whole series is about how to actually embody this, how to have it as a living principle, as a guiding force, and actually as a way of being. So how do you actually take the sacred temple prostitute and that energy and actually live it as a practice in life, in business, with money, and with your sexuality?
Yeah, so there's different practices depending on how you're going to apply, whether it's like in the realm of finance or whether it's in the realm of your body and your sexuality. I think in general, and we have the dolphins, they are here.
Nice.
If they come up, I'll turn the camera around, but I just saw the dolphin, which makes me think, oh, that's so beautiful, which makes me think pleasure needs to come into our talk right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think step one is make the decision to realize that this part of your life can be sacred. If it's your body, if it's sexuality, if it's your relationship to money. And sometimes I have people do like almost like a ceremonial, like create an altar and like give it back to the divine, like ask the divine to come in and like to really take this part of your life. if it's your sexuality, if it's your relationship to money, ask for the sanctification, give this up. And you know what? I always say we need to actually also give up everything, give up all ideas you have of what sacred or sanctified relationship to money or sex means. Because if you're really going to surrender this to the divine, you need to surrender everything, all of the dogmatism too. Actually, sometimes that's what needs to be surrendered the most.
Yes.
Okay, because the divine has had to lead me through some uses of money or like experiences that I would have in my like little holy nun consciousness. Basically, I was like in holy nun, but I had like this like massive trauma load that was just shame demonized and cast out. And I was like, no, I'm perfect now. But I wasn't alive. I wasn't real. I wasn't happy. I wasn't embodied. And a lot of my nun consciousness had to be placed on the altar with the pain and the fear and the shame and everything else. So you got to give everything, the good and the bad, to the divine. And then what I've sort of found, I mean, we have to develop trust. We have to develop trust in God or in Goddess or in ourselves with it. But really, I mean, most tantric principles, it's the tantra. There's some principles in tantra that can really help us to know how to embody it after that. And basically, this mother nature, this feminine creative Shakti energy, which is the created world, which is creating all matter, all money or materialism, and is creating the body, and is, you know, obviously in sexuality, we see that creative power very clearly manifested, like a new life gets born from animals and human beings having sex, and there's a lot of pleasure in that, okay, right? We experience a great degree of pleasure. So the way Shakti works is she works through a pleasure principle. That is how that creative power, when we experience it, it's very, very pleasurable. So one of the things that we need to learn how to follow and that we need to learn how to trust again is our pleasure, okay? Is knowing that like what actually turns you on, like what you really love to do, is what you're meant to do. You know, like when it comes to work, like you really love like getting on a boat and talking about the sacred prostitute. That's what you're meant to be doing. If you really love like this man over here just really loves to sail, like you're meant to be sailing. Like we're all meant to follow our passions. We're meant to follow pleasure, meant to follow like the dolphins. They live in bliss and they follow it. So we have to learn how to trust that again. We have to learn how to trust that in relationship to our career. And we have to learn how to trust that in relationship to our bodies and in relationship to sexuality. Just to kind of go on a totally different track, let's talk about the body. I'm working on that one right now. My health has been all the time. And, you know, I had a lot of health problems because I substituted pleasure that I wasn't getting in other areas of my life with food addiction. Like we've got so much sugar and artificial ingredients and stuff in the food that actually like makes us ill. And you know what I realized is like when you're working with the pleasure principle, you have to realize that there's addictive pleasure. So there's forms of pleasure that actually come from pain and come from like the denial of the life force on some level, and those will normally show up as addictions. So shopping addictions, sex addictions, food addictions, all of that stuff. So we have to learn what real pleasure really is. And that usually involves getting very in touch with nature or what's natural. to us, okay? Our natural design. And so it's so interesting because like you might start with like Tantra and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to follow pleasure. But you go a little bit deeper, you start realizing, oh, it's about elements and it's about balance and it's about these laws of nature that nobody taught me. And you really just start to come back into harmony with the nature of who you are, of how your unique design is meant to be in your career, of how your unique design is meant to kind of be in relationships, you know, like learning like how you, like, what do you really like in terms of, you like boys or girls? Do you, you know, like what's your kind of your different, and like we have all different sexual energy signatures, you know, like I have this like very like nymphy, like little like nymph energy is my sexual energy blueprint. And like I'll meet these women that are like these beautiful goddesses, like these luscious goddesses. So we all have like these unique essences and these unique ways we want to express ourselves in our body. And I found that you start to learn it's like a more natural way of being, and it's not like sort of this garish component to pleasure in our society. It's like Vegas and the strippers and the blowing the lines of coke and like we're addicted, and that's not actually how the Shakti or the natural pleasure, that's part of the shadow. It usually tends to be. And again, you know, with Tantra, you don't judge it. You kind of accept that that's there. And then you just, instead of judging yourself or shaming yourself for it, you say, okay, I've got this habit here. Well, let me explore it. Like what's really going on? Like why am I blowing lines of coke every night? Not saying that people are doing that, but like, you know, you might need to get into maybe a 5-year program for that to kind of get to the root of why you're doing that and get back into balance with yourself. And then sometimes we might have less shadowy things that we could kind of solve through a weekend retreat and kind of getting to the root of what's really going on and how we could bring ourselves back into balance. So it's about following pleasure, and it's also about becoming really conscious of the deeper laws of nature that govern like a balanced experience of pleasure. And I think that that's about really coming back into harmony with the mother principle, with what is natural to us. And so it's very easy. It's like we're really not doing anything. We're just kind of like taking away the false beliefs and the pains and the traumas and the addictions and the things that aren't actually authentic, and just coming back to what is really. That's kind of what ends up happening when you follow this path all the way through to completion.
Fabulous. And in a kind of daily practice of that, what might that look like in using that as part of your creation process?
You want to do like one area, like maybe like could we choose like maybe if it's money or if it's sex or...
Well, let's do money because it's, you know, money is such a polarizing, money and sex. I mean, but let's do money.
Okay. Well, so it might take some time, okay? Because let's say, okay, if you're somebody that's already like, maybe you're doing your purpose and you've got like a little business set up doing it. What are some practices to keep you in your pleasure principle with your relationship to money? I think the first thing that I would say, and this is kind of one of my little rules, I call it the 666 rule because people like the devil. Okay. One of the things that I've seen is I use this with my sacred wealth coaching clients is that we are conditioned in our society to overwork ourselves. 8-hour days are usually more like 10 to 12-hour work days in our culture. If you factor in commuting, basically I say we're three components. We're body, we're mind, and we're spirit. And we live in three worlds of existence. We live in the world of nature, we live in the world of man, the mind, and we live in the world of spirit. And what I've kind of found is that in order to kind of be balanced and be in like a harmonious sort of pleasure principle state, we actually need to spend almost like an equal amount of time or energy in each of these three worlds of consciousness. And so the yogis say that if we were balanced, we would actually only need to sleep 6 hours a night. We need 8 because we overwork ourselves and we're not paying attention to the world of nature and the world of spirit normally. Mm-hmm. But basically, when it comes to the world of nature, this is going to govern everything like related to the natural world, the body, the senses. Family time is because it's the connection with other bodies, other people. Mm-hmm. So friendships, family, sex, eating, exercising, being outdoors in nature, arts, pleasure, culture, all of this is the world of nature. Okay, the world of man is like, what is your service to society? How are you contributing to the collective human experience? This is going to be your job, usually how you're making money, and really anything that you have to do to kind of manage that relationship. Emails, taxes, voting. We all voted yesterday, so it's just like voting, all of these different things. This is like the world of man. And then you have the world of spirit, and the world of spirit is your relationship to the divine. So this is going to be meditation, prayer, journaling, yoga. If you do yoga, spending time alone, spending time resting and turning inward. And if you think about it, if we're really balanced, usually we would be spending about an equal amount of time in each of those areas each day. What we do in our culture is we spend like the majority of time in the world of man, always on the phone, like, you know what I'm saying? And maybe we have a little bit of world of nature. It's like a microwavable dinner and some TV and a wank before bed. And I'm just like, and then there's like no spirit. Maybe spirit is like an hour or two on Sundays. And it's just like, oh my God. We're very, very ill. So my 666 rule is like kind of like only work 6 hours a day. Don't ever work more than that. Nobody needs to work more than that. And here's the thing. You probably need to like be an entrepreneur or have your own business in order to design your life that way. So, there'd be work to get to that part. But I find we really only need to be working about 6 hours a day. If I don't work 6 hours, I kind of don't feel balanced. Like if you are way in spirit or way in nature world and you're not spending enough time in that world, which I've seen in some of the more new age communities, especially where I am in Nashville, then you can get unhappy too. You kind of need fulfilling work, you need fulfilling purpose, but you need to keep it in balance. And so that's something that I think is, for the summit, I think that's a really good, easy to implement rule to kind of bring about the pleasure principle in your life. And then with all of those things, like with how you're working and how you're spending your free time and your pleasure, your world of nature time, go for what is your real turn on. Like what is a real yes for you, because not everybody's gonna want to get on a boat and go sailing or walk or or whatever. Like people are gonna have different ideas. So it's also about like letting yourself design how you use your time and what you invest your time in, so you have a really juicy experience of life that actually turns you on. And when you're doing work that's purposeful and meaningful and you're not overworking yourself, if you're doing you have friendships in your life, you're nurturing your body, you're taking time to cook and just like enjoy the process of cooking or whatever you really enjoy, gardening, and you're spending time with spirit, it's just gonna naturally happen for you. Like the sacred the sacred prostitute naturally, the sacred pleasure naturally comes through. And sacred pleasure, unlike addictive pleasure, it's, you know, it's sustainable. It doesn't throw you out of balance. It's sustainable, it's ongoing. And, you know, thank you so much. And we're all in the process of learning how to get there. Like, I am not perfect. I've been experiencing a lot going on with my physical body. So we're all in the process of like figuring out like what that is going to look like for us. And it's like, and then also as society changes and as the world changes, you know, we're suspect to like those movements. So I think it needs to become like really a collective effort that we make and also give each other permission to. But I certainly think if it's going to be, how do we bring about sacred wealth? Here in America, we focus way too much on the world of man and working and that aspect of life. And we really need as a people to invest time in the other sectors. And that's one of the only ways that I think our society is going to come back into balance. And you know, like every time I see like in the elections and stuff, everybody just kind of goes to the economy as like, how's the president doing or how's our country doing? We really need to realize that success is not just economic achievement, that it is a balance of economic, of purposeful achievement, but also, you know, having wonderful community and family life and taking care of nature and taking care of our bodies and spending time with spirit or with God. And so that is something that I think in general for our society is what we would need to do.
And again, I think it's so perfect that you're on a boat. It's like learning to be in the fluidity and still have your balance. So it's perfect that you're out on the ocean and that you're experiencing that fluidity and the movement. And there's always movement in life and always movement in creation. And how do you bring balance and all pieces of yourself into that?
That's a good point, because you don't need to have 6 hours here, 6 hours here. Right. You could combine. That's, I think, what you're saying. You can combine like the different, like you could like take dance breaks while you're working.
Yeah. Yes.
Bring like an amazing plant into your office, or like lots of plants into your office, right? Yes. So that's also a way that we can kind of bring that balanced pleasure principle, or that sacred pleasure principle, into our life.
Yes, yes. Well, you've given everyone lots to kind of lean into, because, you know, especially around the sacred temple prostitute, it may be a completely new idea and maybe a little scary, maybe a little intimidating, or maybe really intriguing, but it's something to lean into and see what it means for you. It doesn't have to mean the same thing as it does for Kara or for me. Whatever is perfect for you, whatever that balance looks like, whatever pieces of yourself need to come home. So some ideas to kind of percolate and like land in your own body and experience. So thank you for bringing those forward. And you actually have a free gift that will help people start to actually bring this into more of their lives and reality.
Yeah. I actually offer a lot of free material on my website. I think I have, if you'd like to study the Magdalene wounds, which are those shaming, the demonizing, the casting out of the divine feminine, there's a free call series, 3 calls. They're like 90-minute calls. You get a lot of content in this. You can get that at Waking Beauty. Sophia?
There you are.
I'm so sorry. The computer lost charge.
That's quite all right. What you were saying is that if anyone wants to connect to you, they can go to wakingbeauty.com. And then as far as the Magdalene wounds, we'll also connect that page.
/Magdalene-call if you want to get that 3-part call series. And then there's a link on my website for free resources. And there's actually a ton of free resources. So there's lots of free gifts, lots of seminars for you to participate in. So,
fantastic.
yeah.
So people will get some juiciness. They can lean more into this information and learn more about you again at wakingbeauty.com.
Mm-hmm.
And just to wrap up, Kara, if there was one sacred secret that wants to come through in this moment about how to embody that pleasure and actually take that sacred sexual prostitute energy and infuse it into every area of your life, what would you say that would be?
You know what came through is love. So, so the the word whore, some people think that word comes from the Greek word hieros, which is the word for hieros gamos, which means the beloved. Hieros means beloved. So these were women that they had a very deep love for God and love for goddess and love for life and love for themselves and love for each other. And I think that one of the things that we also learn in this tantric path is that, you know, the pleasure principle, or that Shakti, or that creative principle, is the essence of power. So those who are basically able to express, I'm just trying to see how the light won't go in and out here, but those who are able to express their pleasure more fully, or their sacred pleasure more fully, become empowered. They literally, it's not the power we're used to in the like sense of force over, but there's like a magnetism, there's Shakti, there's like, you're like, this is a powerful person, there's light in them, there's something in them that's very powerful. Your thoughts manifest more easily, you're a more magnetic being the more you allow this pleasure principle into your life. But the highest form of the power, so there's like this transmutation that happens from pleasure, like following one's own pleasure, to this higher form of the power. The greatest power in all the universe is love. And so that's the power that comes into us when I think I think love is about really realizing that there's like way more pleasure in helping other people also be happy and be in their power. And with, I think if enough people get to the place where they've like loved themselves enough to kind of get stabilized in their pleasure principle, that they can actually devote enough of their energy to the love of others, I don't think we're going to have any problems on this planet coming up with solutions or anything, because there's so much power in the force of love. And you know, a mother, if she's saving her children, can lift a car like a He-Man. You know what I'm saying? Like, we find superhuman strength like through both this pleasure principle, and then I also think through love. So whatever inspires that devotion in you, whatever inspires that deep love in you, like make your life about that, devote your life to that, and you will become a real sacred prostitute, a holy prostitute, not a shadow prostitute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for bringing this forward and like leaning more into the conversation. It was coming up last night, and I'm so glad we actually brought this even deeper today. And I know it certainly changed my life going on this journey with you a few years ago. So I want to thank you personally and for the audience that's listening today. I
just love seeing how you've transformed. It's been just awe-inspiring, and I absolutely loved this summit. I was such a yes to participate again, and I'm super excited to see and hear all the other interviews, and I love you, and I hope you have an amazing time with the wolves and
Yes.
everything that's going down in Seattle.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, the wolves are very present, and sailing in the ocean and dolphins are present too. So let's incorporate that in too. So with our traveling support groups, so we'll we'll bring that in. But thank you again, and audience, I hope you really lean into this conversation and whatever it looks like, devoting yourself to your pleasure and really giving yourself and everything of yourself to the divine. So thank you for being with us again on Pleasure Principles, Sacred G-Spot Secrets to Embodying Your Magic, Money, Sex, and Business. Ciao for now.
Yeah. Ciao.